Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world you think you know, but trust me, you don't. It's the Middle Ages, a time of towering castles, devout prayers, and muddy roads filled with suspicious puddles. But tonight we won't be swinging swords or storming fortresses. No. Tonight we're going to talk about something far less glamorous and far more real. Something that sticks between the toes of history and never quite washes off. Welcome to the question that's been whispered in museums and shouted in online forums. How clean were medieval people? Now, before we dig in, literally, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see who's tuning in across the clock and across the globe. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum, and let's slip together into tonight's story. Because tonight's journey, how clean were medieval people, picture a world without toothpaste, without deodorant, without regular access to soap, hot water, or even the concept of daily hygiene. Picture a world where most people didn't even own a second pair of underwear. A world where washing your hands could be considered luxurious and bathing was something you timed with religious festivals or a really bad smell. But here's the thing. It's not as simple as they were all filthy. That's the myth. The reality is stranger, dirtier, and weirdly more organized than you'd expect. Medieval people weren't oblivious to cleanliness. They just had a very different idea of what it meant. They had bathhouses, some of them public, some of them scandalous. They had herbs to scrub with vinegar rinses and strange oils rubbed into their skin with confidence and questionable results. They had rituals, routines, and rules passed down through generations, shaped by whether religion, and whatever the local stream wasn't doing that week. And yet, for all their efforts, for all their prayers and potions, most people in the medieval world spent their lives carrying a quiet, persistent layer of dirt. The kind that settles into your skin, your clothes, your home until you don't even notice it's there. Tonight, we're not just asking how often they bathed. We're walking through the smells, the scrubbing, the plague-born paranoia. We'll dive into the weirdness of medieval dental care, the prestige of cleanliness among monks, and the tragic reality of medieval plumbing. It's not a story of neatness. It's a story of trying, of soap made from ashes and animal fat, of combs shared with lice, of bathhouses filled with gossip beer and the occasional bar fight. It's about what happens when you try to be clean in a world that's constantly trying to make you otherwise. So settle in. You're not in the 21st century anymore. You're in a world of chamber pots, herbal tonics, and social rules that dictated who could bathe when and with whom. And tonight, you'll find out exactly how clean or not you would have been. You open your eyes and immediately regret it. The air is thick with smoke breath and the vague aroma of wet wool that hasn't seen a proper rinse since last Michaelmas. There's no sunlight piercing through sleek curtains or the gentle hum of your climate control. Know your morning begins with the aching creak of a wooden shutter, struggling against the wind and the snores of at least 3 other humans, maybe 4. Someone's cousin came by last night and just never left. You're lying on what could generously be called a mattress, more accurately, a sack of straw flattened by years of sleepless turning and the occasional livestock nap. The straw pokes through in places, scratching at your back and legs. It smells of old hay, spilled ale, and something faintly fungal. You've got a single coarse blanket over you, rough as a potato sack, and about as warm. It's not just itchy, it's actively aggressive. A medieval exfoliation, whether you like it or not. As your body starts to ache awake, the first thing you notice is the cold. Not the crisp kind that makes you feel alive. This cold clings. It sinks. The kind that worms its way into your joints, finds your spine, and settles there like an unwanted ghost. The kind of chill that makes you wonder if maybe you're still dreaming, and this is some ironic punishment for not appreciating modern radiators. There's no central heating here. The hearth fire from last night has long since gone out, leaving nothing but gray ash and the scent of half-burned wood. No coals, no warmth. Just a few stubborn embers hiding like tiny survivors of the night's frost. You sit up slowly, bones cracking like old furniture. Every muscle protests. You're 28, which in this world is frankly heroic. Your joints think you're 60. Your mattress groans as you shift, and not because it has springs, it's just that old and tired. Around you, the room begins to come into focus. One room for everything. Kitchen, bedroom, storage, chicken roost. The ceiling is low, the beams above you black with soot from years of open fire cooking and bad ventilation. The walls are made of timber and wattle, essentially sticks filled in with mud and dung carefully smeared for maximum draft protection. You can see your breath even indoors. Your nose stings, your feet are already numb, and there's frost on the inside of the tiny window pane. Correction, the oiled parchment square pretending to be glass. Across the room, your father is already up, tying a belt around his tunic. His face is lined not just with age, but with years of smoke, sun, and perpetual squinting. Beside him, your mother is awake, too, stoking the fire with one hand and nursing a crying baby with the other. There's no privacy, no soft lighting. Just raw existence and the constant sound of someone coughing, sneezing, or stepping in something they hoped was just mud. You stretch your legs toward the edge of the bed and immediately regret that too. The floor is not wood or tile, it's dirt. Cold, frozen dirt pressed hard by years of footsteps and slick with the moisture that rose up from the ground overnight. It's muddy in places, especially where the family dog slept and, well, did other things. Your toes find your shoes. They're stiff, half-frozen leather, with no lining and no soles. You slept beside them to stop someone from stealing them or rats from nesting inside. Only one of those precautions worked. Slipping them on is an act of willpower. They're damp. They're unforgiving. And yet they're essential, because outside the ground is a patchwork of ice manure and the kind of filth that doesn't get better with time. The chamber pot waits in the corner. You used it last night. So did someone else. Probably multiple someones. It's full, it smells, and guess who gets to carry it outside today? Congratulations, it's you. There's no toilet, of course. You'll carry the pot outside past the chickens and the woodpile to the edge of the field or the village gutter. You dump it carefully. This is both a hygiene task and a public embarrassment gauntlet. One false step and you'll start the day ankle deep in your family's collective failure. As you pass through the room, you try to avoid eye contact. Not because of shame, but because there's nowhere to look. Your sister is waking up, hair matted, eyes red. She scratches herself with mechanical indifference. Fleas, lice, both. Everyone has them. It's not disgusting, it's just life. You've developed a polite rule not to talk about it. The smell of the room is rich and layered, unwashed bodies, dried herbs hung to mask the odor, smoke, boiled onions. And beneath it all, the sour tang of rot wood food, cloth, maybe hope. The fire finally catches. Your mother adds a few sticks, sparing the good wood for later. You feel its warmth on your face for a moment, and it's glorious. It won't last. Outside, the day is beginning. A rooster crows, followed by a sheep bleating angrily, and a child shouting in response. Smoke curls from the roof of your neighbor's house, visible through the cracks in your wall. Somewhere a bell rings, probably the church, or the town crier, or just a man shouting about eels again. You're up. You're alive. You're cold, itchy, and slightly damp. Your first achievement of the day is not dying in your sleep, and somehow that counts as a good start. You shuffle toward the hearth, teeth chattering slightly. Your feet are already numb from the walk to the privy trench and back. Outside, the wind bites like it's personally offended by your existence. Inside, the warmth from the small fire is just enough to make the room smell like damp wool and ash in HD. It's breakfast time. And if you're thinking eggs toast or anything remotely appetizing, pause that fantasy now. You sit on the ground or on a lopsided wooden stool that creaks more than a haunted door. The table is a plank of wood laid across barrels. The dishes, wood. The spoon, also wood. The food, that's generous. Your mother ladles out pottage. Not fresh, not new, just an eternal pot of slowly dying vegetables and mystery ingredients that's been simmering for days. It's more tradition than recipe. Cabbage, maybe turnip, possibly lentils if someone was feeling fancy last Thursday. There's a chunk floating in there that might be meat, or might be yesterday's bread that achieved a second life. You inhale the steam. It smells like overcooked onion and defeat. On the side, there's bread. But this isn't your sourdough Instagram dream loaf. It's a dense grayish brick known as maslin, a mix of rye barley and maybe a handful of whatever flour was sweepable from the mill floor. It's dry. It's heavy. It could be classified as a weapon in 5 jurisdictions. You break off a piece. It crumbles unevenly. You chew slowly, letting your jaw do the medieval cardio. There's a bit of grit in it. Grinding stones weren't precise, so, yes, your daily bread is lightly seasoned with sand. You chew through it anyway, because calories are calories, and taste is a luxury reserved for saints and lords. There's no butter, no jam, no coffee. Definitely no coffee. The concept of coffee won't reach this part of the world for centuries, and tea. Not unless you're a monk with a secret trade connection or hallucinating from last night's herbal concoction. You might have ale. It's weak, cloudy, and served at room temperature, which is unfortunate because that temperature is very, very cold. But it's safer than water. Water, after all, could come from a stream or a well or a neighbor's trench that forgot it's upstream from your own. So, beer it is. Breakfast beer. For you, your siblings, and even the children. Because nothing says start your day like fermented barley and the mild threat of intestinal parasites. Sometimes there's cheese, hard dry, slightly sour, more rind than substance. And if there's fruit, it's dried or old or fermented. You eat around the soft parts and pretend the rest is intentional. Now let's talk hygiene. You wipe your hands on your tunic. That's normal. There's no napkin, no sink, no soap. The idea of germ theory hasn't arrived yet. Most people still believe disease comes from bad smells, curses, or an angry saint. Cleanliness is more spiritual than medical. To clean yourself, you might splash water on your face if someone boiled some. If not, it's cold water from the communal basin or the stream. No soap unless you made lye out of ashes and animal fat last month. It's harsh, caustic, and smells like what it is: fire residue and old pig. Brushing your teeth. That's not happening. You might chew on a stick, maybe rinse with vinegar if you're rich, or suffer from advanced optimism. Most people just let nature do its thing, which means teeth fall out early. Breath smells like old bread, and toothaches are considered a natural part of aging at 15. As for your body, well, baths are complicated. Public bathhouses do exist in cities and towns, but they're expensive, scandalous, or both. In rural areas, you might bathe once a month. Maybe. And not a long soak either. Just a quick rinse in a wooden tub with water heated painfully slowly over a fire poured in with a jug and shared by multiple family members in age order. The last person in gets what can only be described as ancestral broth, and the soap lye again, or a handful of herbs rubbed on the skin with vigorous hope. Some people used sand to scrub. Others used old urine fermented into ammonia as a cleaning agent. You've heard rumors of nobles soaking in milk or rose water, but in your world, bathing means not freezing to death while trying not to swallow the gray water sloshing in your only tub. Hair washing rare. Maybe once every couple of weeks. You might rub in ashes vinegar or nettle-infused water. You pick out lice with a fine-toothed wooden comb if you're lucky enough to own one. More often it's fingers and mutual grooming, a social bonding moment with an itchy, scratchy soundtrack. Clothing. You sleep in it, wake in it, work in it, and probably get buried in it. Washing clothes is a monumental effort involving hauling water, heating it over hours, scrubbing with ashes, and wringing out fabrics so heavy they could drown you if dropped in a stream. So instead, people spot clean, or air things out, or pretend not to smell the smell. Your undergarments, if you have any, are linen, softish, occasionally washed. Your outerwear never sees soap, maybe snow, maybe rain. That's enough, right? There's also the idea, widespread and accepted, that washing too often is dangerous, especially hot baths. Some physicians warn that opening the pores can allow disease in. Others suggest that strong smells keep bad spirits away. So while you might smell like smoke, sweat, and fermented cabbage, you might also believe that's protective. And who's to argue you're alive? It's cold, your stomach's sort of full, and you've scrubbed your hands with straw and rinsed your face in a puddle. In this world, that's hygiene. And now it's time to get dressed. Not that it makes you cleaner, just slightly less exposed. You're standing barefoot on a dirt floor, face still tingling from the splash of cold water you dared call washing. And now it's time to get dressed, though. In truth, you probably already are. In the medieval world, you don't change clothes in the morning. You just continue wearing what you wore yesterday and the day before that, and probably the week before that, unless something tore, burned, or got eaten by the family goat. Let's start with your base layer. If you're lucky, and we're using lucky generously here, you own a linen undershirt. It's long, scratchy, and a bit yellowish no matter how often it's scrubbed, which isn't very. This shift or smock is the closest thing you have to underwear, and for many, it's the only garment ever in contact with the skin. It's not designed for comfort. It's designed to soak up the worst of your body's complaints and protect your outer clothing from being totally destroyed by sweat dirt and the medieval elements, which include smoke, soot, and occasionally sheep pee. Over that, you throw on your main tunic. Made from wool, always wool. Even in summer, It's heavy, rough, itchy, and smells like the sheep it came from. Because it was a sheep, and the washing process was more of a suggestion than a guarantee. It's dyed maybe if you're lucky enough to afford color, but most likely it's a lovely shade of brownish-grayish meh. Earth tones dominate not because they're stylish, but because that's what dirt naturally becomes when it's lived on your clothes for 2 seasons straight. If it's winter or just cold, which is always, you wear more wool. Layers on layers. A cloak fastened with a brooch or a bit of string. Hoods that sag. Mittens if someone was particularly generous, or had time to knit with rough-spun yarn that makes your skin cry. And no matter what you wear, it's never enough to ward off the damp chill that lives in your bones like an unwanted tenant. Your shoes. Let's talk about your shoes, or rather your apologies to your feet. They're made of leather, but not the nice kind. These are rawhide flaps stitched into foot prisons. There's no left or right, just shoe and other shoe. They have no soles, no support, and no forgiveness. They let in cold water and small pebbles with equal enthusiasm. You tie them with a thong of twine and hope it holds. And if you don't have shoes, many don't. You just go barefoot. Through mud, dung, brambles, and puddles of unknown origin. You build up calluses and hope you never step on a rusty nail or angry chicken. Now your neighbors might look slightly different depending on wealth. A wealthier peasant or a tradesperson in town might own a doublet hose or even a second tunic for best. That second tunic is never worn unless you're going to church or someone's funeral. Maybe both in the same week. It is your prize garment, your personality, your portable bank account. And if it gets stolen, you may as well lie down and wait for God. Women's clothing is equally limited. A long chemise over it, a woolen kirtle, and maybe an apron if there's work to be done, which is always. Hair is covered with a wimple coif or scarf depending on age, marital status, or regional custom. You never let your hair loose in public unless you want the priest to mention you in a sermon titled "Sin Begins at the Scalp." And yes, everything smells. You, your clothes, your home, the air. It's all been steeped in layers of sweat, smoke, lard, and mildew. There's no Febreze. There's no airing out anything unless the sun's out long enough to dry something before the rain returns. So you accept the smell. Like a badge, or a punishment, or both. Now step outside. Take in your home from the outside, a medieval hut or cottage. It's not quaint. It's not rustic. It's not the inspiration for a cozy video game. It's a structure that hates you slightly less than the weather does. The walls wattle and daub, meaning wooden strips covered in mud, dung, and straw. It's organic, technically breathable, and constantly falling apart. In summer, it bakes. In winter, it leaks. In spring, it leaks differently. The roof thatched with straw, which means mice live there and rain gets in. If you're really unlucky, it catches fire and takes the whole street with it. Fire is less of a risk and more of an inevitability. Windows, maybe one. Small, unglazed, covered with oiled cloth or animal bladder, stretched tight and nailed into place. It lets in light drafts and sometimes birds. Glass is rare and wildly expensive, reserved for churches and lords. The door is crooked. The hinges groan. There's no lock, just a bar across the inside or a latch that discourages no one. Privacy doesn't exist. Sound travels, smells even faster. You hear your neighbors sneeze, fight, sing, and very unfortunately, procreate. And they hear you too. Inside, you've got one room. One. maybe two if you're fancy and built a sleeping loft. The main room is everything: kitchen, living space, sleeping quarters, birthing area, workshop, and chicken habitat. It smells like it. The floor is dirt, packed cold and occasionally muddy from a leak in the roof or the dog's poor decisions. Rushes or straw might be scattered across it in an attempt to keep things clean. Spoiler, they don't. They just trap dirt, crumbs, bugs, and whatever walked in on your boots last week. There's a hearth, of course, central to everything. It's how you cook, warm up, dry clothes, survive. But there's no chimney. The smoke just rises and kind of wanders. It pools in the ceiling, curls along the beams, makes your eyes sting and lungs burn. The children cough. Everyone does. Constantly. It's called living. The furnishings are simple. A bench, a table, maybe a stool, a trunk if you're lucky. No mattress unless you count the hay pile, and no pillows unless you count your arm. The walls are bare except for a few tools. Maybe a religious icon. Maybe a drying rack for herbs. Maybe a rat. And yet, for all its misery, this is home. This is safety. You're not outside. You're not exposed to the elements, the taxman or the wolves. You're here inside walls that mostly stand up straight, with a roof that mostly keeps out the rain, in clothes that mostly keep out the cold. This is what shelter means. Not comfort, not peace, just survival. So pull your wool tight, wipe your nose on your sleeve, and step outside. It's time for work. The cold morning air hits you like a slap wrapped in fog. You pull your cloak tighter, not because it helps. It's as thick as a wet rag and twice as heavy, but because pretending to be warm is part of surviving here. Your boots, still damp from yesterday, squelch slightly as you walk. The road is mud, always mud. A never-ending, sticky, soul-stealing stretch of earth that swallows feet and carts and occasionally hope. You're headed to work, although work might be too kind a word for it. This isn't a job. You don't clock in. You don't collect a salary. There are no breaks, no pensions, no motivational posters reminding you to hang in there. There's just labor. Constant, grueling, body-breaking labor. And it starts before the sun properly rises. If you're a peasant, which you are, then your work is survival. You don't farm for profit. You farm so you and your family don't starve in a ditch this winter. You rise before dawn, grab your tools, and head to the fields. They aren't yours. They belong to the local lord, who has never touched a plow in his life, and who collects a portion of your harvest, whether it's been a good season or a biblical disaster. Your tools, a wooden plow, if you're lucky enough to have access to an ox. Otherwise, it's a spade, a rake, your hands, blistered, raw, calloused beyond recognition. Your fingernails are permanently black. Your joints scream every time you bend, which is often. Your back feels like it's been personally insulted by God. You weed. You dig. You sow. You reap. If it's winter, you chop wood, mend fences, scrape ice off the inside of your one-room hut, and try not to freeze to death. If it's spring, you plant. If it's summer, you sweat. If it's fall, you harvest and pray. And always, always you carry things. Barrels, baskets, bundles of sticks, grain sacks heavier than your own body weight. Water from the well uphill both ways somehow. You don't stop carrying things until your arms go numb, or worse, stop moving altogether. If you're not in the fields, you might be in the forest, gathering firewood, hunting if you dare risk the wrath of the game warden and the forest laws that make poaching a punishable offense, even if you're only trying to feed your starving child. You sneak out early, set a snare, pray to whatever saint is in charge of rabbits, and hope no one sees you bringing meat back home. Or maybe you're in the village thatched roof overhead, hammer in hand. A blacksmith, if you've got the arms and the scars. A cooper making barrels. A thatcher risking your life to fix someone else's roof with brittle straw and a prayer. Every job is dangerous. Every tool is primitive. Every mistake can cost you fingers or worse. Women work too. Of course they do. Always have. Always will. They grind grain by hand, cook over open flames, spin wool until their fingers bleed, tend gardens, carry children, nurse babies, scrape muck patch clothing, and somehow still manage to be up before you every morning. If you think medieval women were idle, you've never seen one wrestle a boiling pot off a fire while wrangling a toddler and shouting at a chicken to get off the table. Children aren't exempt. By age 7, they're in the fields or helping at home, carrying water, watching livestock, chasing off crows. They don't go to school. They don't play. Childhood is a concept reserved for nobility and the modern imagination. Here, if you can walk, you can work. The work is never done. There is no end, no rest. The Sabbath is technically a day off, but even then the fire needs feeding. The animals need tending. Someone's goat is in someone else's garden. The roof is leaking, again, and winter is always coming. And let's not forget the dangers. Injury is constant. You trip with a scythe and lose a toe. You get kicked by a horse. You fall off a ladder made of regrets and splinters. There are no hospitals, no painkillers, just a local healer with a bundle of herbs and maybe a bone saw. Infection is more lethal than wolves. And if you're not hurt by your work, you might be punished for not doing enough of it. Lords inspect fields. Overseers shout. Taxes are due. Rents are demanded in coin-grain labor or all three. If you're too sick to work, you fall behind. If you fall behind, you get fined. If you can't pay, you lose land. If you lose land, you lose everything. Worse, you might be conscripted. Pressed into military service for some feud or war you don't understand, fighting people you've never met. You leave with a rusty spear and no armor. You come back with trauma and fewer teeth if you come back at all. And the worst part, none of this guarantees survival. A bad harvest can wipe you out. A flood can destroy everything. A lord's whim can change your rent or seize your ox. A disease can sweep through your village and leave you digging graves instead of furrows. No one thanks you. No one writes your name in books. No one remembers the work of peasants, except in the sense that they were always there, bending, digging, dying. But you do it, day after day, because there is no other choice. And maybe, just maybe, the field is kind this year. Maybe your child doesn't get sick. Maybe the bread stretches just far enough. Maybe the roof doesn't leak. Maybe the winter is mild. And in that slim, fragile gap between suffering and catastrophe, you live. You're in the middle of a long, hard day, mud on your boots, splinters in your hands, and thoughts full of rent weather, and whether that cough you've developed is just the cold or something worth confessing. But above all else, through every ache and uncertainty, one thing keeps you going. Belief. In the medieval world, belief isn't optional. It isn't something you ponder on a slow weekend. It's the framework of your reality. It tells you when to wake, when to kneel, when to fast, and what to fear. Religion is not just something you do, it's who you are. It's how you stay alive, or at least how you try to avoid eternal damnation while dying early anyway. Your day begins and ends with the church bell tolling through the fog like God clearing his throat. It marks the hours matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nones, vespers, and compline. You don't understand them all, but you know when it's time to stop working and pray. Or when it's time to stop praying and work harder. You live in fear of sin. Not dramatic sin, no one's out here strangling bishops for fun, but small sins. Everyday failures, impure thoughts, idle gossip, forgetting to cross yourself before you eat, missing Mass because your cart got stuck in a ditch. You never quite feel clean, spiritually, mentally, physically. Confession is how you try to fix that. A dark booth, a tired priest, and your whispered litany of minor sins. I swore when I stubbed my toe. I stole an egg. I thought unkindly about my neighbor's sheep. The priest sighs, absolves, and tells you to say 10 Hail Marys and maybe stop envying the sheep. And yet for all the rules, for all the stern Latin sermons and stiff-backed saints glaring from the walls of your crumbling chapel, your faith is not cold. It's deeply human, deeply superstitious. You believe in God, of course. Everyone does. But you also believe in fairies, in ghosts, in charms, in the old gods whose names nobody says out loud anymore, but whose trees nobody dares cut down. Your world is full of symbols and signs. A raven flying east means good luck. A black cat crossing your path means misfortune, unless it's Tuesday. Then it means your neighbor is probably a witch. Yes, witches. They're real. Or at least everyone acts like they are. You know who might be one. That old woman with the herbal teas and the strange herbs. She helped deliver your cousin's baby, but also didn't her cow die last spring? Suspicious. Better keep your distance. Or bring her an offering. Just in case. The devil is everywhere. He lurks in illness and bad weather and spilled milk and stubbed toes. He tempts. He whispers. He dances in the woods if you believe the rumors. You cross yourself every time lightning strikes. You say a quick prayer when a rooster crows at the wrong time of day. And if your child falls ill, you whisper all the saints' names you can remember, because maybe one of them is listening. The saints are your protectors, your intercessors, your cosmic middle managers. There's a saint for everything. Saint Elmo for sailors, Saint Apollonia for toothaches, Saint Isidore for farmers, Saint Lawrence for cooks, he was grilled alive so that tracks. You wear tokens, medals, or knotted threads on your wrist. They're not just fashion. They're shields, little prayers wrapped in cloth and hope. Holy relics are powerful. A toe bone from St. Peter, a scrap of cloth from St. Mary. Or so you're told. It might actually be a bit of pig leather or someone's old sock. Doesn't matter. Belief gives it power. People travel miles to touch these things. They believe miracles happen. Sometimes they do or seem to. A headache fades. A sore heals. A child survives. Is it divine? Is it coincidence? You don't question. You just give thanks and light another candle. Pilgrimages are holy journeys. long, punishing walks to faraway shrines where saints once walked or died or spilled something important. You dream of going one day to Canterbury, to Santiago de Compostela. Maybe even to Rome, though. That's a madman's ambition. Most never leave the village. But the dream remains. A pilgrimage is like a medieval vacation, only with more blisters and guilt. Feast days break up the calendar. Thank the Lord. Literally. They're the rare days when you don't have to work quite as hard, and you might even eat something sweet. St. Michael's Day, All Saints' Day, Christmas, Easter. Lent, of course, is the opposite of fun. You fast, you suffer, you don't eat meat unless you pretend a beaver counts as a fish, which somehow it does. The calendar is full of holy rhythms, Candlemas, Whitsun, Corpus Christi. The wheel of time turns not with birthdays or holidays, but with saints, harvests, fasts, and processions. The seasons aren't just weather, they're theology. Death is always close, always watching. So your belief must be constant. You don't know when you'll die. A fever, a wound, a cough, a famine. So every night you pray, if I should die before I wake. Because honestly, you might. And if you die unconfessed with sin on your soul, straight to hell. No questions, no trial. Just demons and flames and eternal regret. Forever. That's why you keep a rosary near. Why you whisper the Lord's Prayer while planting seeds. Why you nod at every crucifix you pass just in case. Heaven is everything. Hell is always. Purgatory is the lottery you hope to win. But your religion isn't just fear. There's beauty, too. The choir's voice echoing through stone arches. The smell of incense curling in the rafters. The feel of candle wax dripping onto your fingers. The stained glass windows telling stories in color and light. Even if you can't read, you can see. You can feel. And somewhere deep down in your aching bones and dirt-lined fingernails, you believe that someone is listening, that suffering has meaning, that even in this cold, hard, brutal world there is grace. Maybe not today, maybe not for you, but for someone, somewhere. And maybe that's enough. It's late in the day now. Your body is sore, your hands are rough, and your stomach is rumbling again, not that it ever really stopped. Food in the medieval world isn't about taste or satisfaction. It's about not collapsing. It's about filling the void with something vaguely edible and hoping it stays down. Evening meals are the biggest of the day, mostly because you've earned it. You've been working since before the sun showed its face, and now as the sky starts to bruise into twilight, you finally sit down. Or crouch. Or stand near the fire while gnawing on something questionable. Chairs are a luxury. So is sitting. Dinner is once again pottage. Yes, the same thick stew from this morning, only now it's thicker, saltier, and somehow more mysterious. It's a permanent pot fed daily with whatever scraps you've scrounged, traded, or grown. Carrots, turnips, maybe a piece of dried meat, or a bone with the idea of meat still lingering on it. Herbs, if they're in season. Onions, if you're lucky. Flavor, mostly hope. You spoon it out of a wooden bowl and blow on it even though it's not hot. It hasn't been hot since your grandmother stirred it before you were born. There's no timing here, no recipes, just a pot and a prayer. And you eat in silence or low murmurs, conserving energy, chewing slowly. It's not that you savor it. You just don't want to choke. There's bread again. Dry, dense crumbling. It's soaked in the pottage now because your teeth can't handle it otherwise. The grit from the grindstone is still there, but your gums are used to it. That dull crunch is as familiar as the taste. You might have ale again, small beer weak, and barely alcoholic, safer than water brewed in the corner of the house in a barrel that leaks from the side. It tastes like warm-bread tea, and you're grateful for it. If you're lucky, special occasions, someone's birthday, a holy feast, you might get meat. Real meat. Salted pork if you've slaughtered recently. Maybe rabbit if someone was bold. Maybe fish if you live near water, and someone had a net and a few free hours. But most nights, meat is just a memory, or the smell wafting from the Lord's table where waste is more common than you'll ever taste. Now, despite all this gloom, mealtime is also social time. The day's work is done. Sort of. The chickens are penned, the hearth is lit, and there's a brief lull in the noise of surviving. This is when stories get told. Not just news, but legends, family histories, cautionary tales about the miller's cousin who angered a witch and was cursed with weeping bread. Children gather around wide-eyed. Elders mutter half-truths about things they remember or maybe dreamed. There's laughter occasionally, small, quiet, restrained. Not joy exactly, but a temporary relief from the crushing weight of the day. Sometimes someone brings an instrument, a lute missing strings, a pipe carved from bone, a drum made from stretched hide. The music is simple, repetitive, hypnotic. You tap your foot, you hum along. You don't know the lyrics, but you know the feeling. It's ancient, it's human, and for a few minutes, the world doesn't hurt as much. Entertainment isn't something you plan. It happens when it happens. On market day, maybe you see a juggler, a fool, a man with a trained goose. Maybe there's a traveling troupe, actors, singers, dancers. They perform moral plays and bawdy jokes, switching masks in the square. Everyone gathers. Everyone laughs. Even the priest if he thinks no one's looking. Markets are their own kind of theater. Not just for buying, but for seeing. Who's got eggs today? Who's wearing a new cloak? Who's limping worse than last week? You trade gossip as much as goods. You eye the baker's daughter. You hope the reeve isn't counting too closely. You watch the world go by in wool and wooden shoes. Taverns are where things get rowdier. If your village is big enough or you're near a road, there's a place where people gather to drink something vaguely resembling ale, play dice with rules no one agrees on, and argue about who stole whose chicken in 1347. Fights happen. They always do. But so do songs, crude jokes, and alliances formed over shared dislike of a lord's new tax. Festivals are rare, sacred, chaotic. A feast day means food dancing banners. Maybe a roast pig. Maybe a makeshift tournament where farmers pretend to be knights for half an hour before twisting an ankle. There's music too, drums, flutes, shouting. People dress in their second-best clothes. The children run in circles. The adults drink too much. Someone ends up in a ditch. It's tradition. These moments, small, infrequent, messy, are what make life bearable. You don't have hobbies. You don't have leisure. But you do have stories. Music. Laughter that doesn't cost anything. A neighbor who knows 3 riddles. A child who dances when they think no one is watching. And when the day ends, you lie back down on your straw mattress, belly half full, head spinning with whatever passed for fun tonight. You listen to the crackle of the fire, the low breathing of your family, the soft snores of someone with nothing left to give. You're not happy, not really. But you're alive. And in the medieval world, that counts for something. You wake up coughing. Not just the usual "I slept in smoke" cough. This one rattles, deep, wet, and it hurts a little when you breathe. You tell yourself it's nothing. Cold air, too much damp, you'll be fine. You always say that. Because here in the medieval world, illness is constant, like weather, or taxes, or lice. It's not if you get sick, it's when, and how bad, and whether it kills you this time or next. Everyone is sick, all the time. The air in your cottage is thick with smoke mildew, and the breath of everyone you live with dozens of lungs all recycling the same recycled air. There's no ventilation, no insulation. When one person coughs, everyone hears it. When one person gets sick, everyone gets sick. And medicine. Medicine is not what you think. It starts with herbs, always herbs. Dried bundles hanging from the rafters steeped in boiling water, or mashed into a paste. You drink them. You smear them. You inhale them. Some help. Most just taste terrible. Some, like belladonna or henbane, might help the pain, or send you into a dream state where your body thinks it's flying, while actually just losing bladder control. There are healers. The village wise woman. The local herbalist. The monk who reads Latin and knows which prayers go with which poultice. But even they work with guesswork. Tradition. Hearsay passed down from someone who lived to 35 and was considered a genius. You get headaches, that's an imbalance of humors. Your bile is too yellow, or your blood is too hot. They might bleed you. Yes, with a knife, or with leeches. Because everyone knows too much blood causes bad moods, bad dreams, and boils. You've got a fever that could be demonic possession, or maybe just a punishment from God. Either way, confession might be suggested, or a pilgrimage, or prayer while someone presses garlic to your feet and whispers to Saint Sebastian. Injuries are worse. There are no antibiotics, no sterile rooms, no anesthetic. If you break a leg, they tie it with a splint and hope. If it swells, they cut. If it smells, they cut more. Infection means death, or worse, amputation. Teeth are a whole nightmare of their own. You don't brush them. You don't floss. You might chew mint leaves or rub your gums with salt if you're fancy. But mostly, you just accept the rot. When a tooth hurts, it hurts for weeks. Then it falls out or gets yanked out with pliers heated over the fire. No numbing, no warning. Just grip and scream and hope. And if the wound festers or the jaw swells or your breath starts to smell like death, you lie down. You drink ale. You ask for last rites. Childbirth, let's not even pretend it's safe. Every woman knows it might be the last thing she ever does. Midwives come with linen rags, whispered prayers, and hope. But no pain relief, no sanitation. If something goes wrong, and it often does, there's nothing to be done but hold her hand and pray she doesn't scream too loud. Children. Half of them don't make it past 5. They're born into sickness. They grow up surrounded by it. Rashes, fevers, coughs, fits. They waste away slowly or suddenly vanish overnight. And you don't get answers. Just grief and more pottage. And then there's the plague. You've heard of it. Everyone has. It comes like a shadow, fast and silent and final. Boils in the armpits. Black spots. Fever. Madness. Death in a day. Whole villages wiped out, fields abandoned, silence in the streets broken only by the sound of church bells and shovel scraping earth. When plague comes, the doors get barred, not to keep it out. To keep it in, they mark the door with a cross. Sometimes the whole family is locked inside to die together, because there's no cure, no plan, just fear. You see it in the eyes of the priest, the fear. He tries to hide it. But when he puts on the mask, the one with the long beak stuffed with herbs, he's afraid too. You hear the stories of people dancing in the streets, desperate to feel alive before the end, of doctors running away, of cities burning their dead in heaps. You wonder if it comes here, who will bury you? And even when it's not the plague, death is everywhere. In the fields, in the fire, in the water. People drown in wells, get kicked by horses, cut themselves on rusty tools, die of a cold that lingers too long. You go to sleep every night unsure if you'll wake up, or if your brother will, or your mother, or the baby who started coughing yesterday. So you pray. Not because it's habit, because it's your only defense. You pray to the Virgin Mary, to Saint Roch, to anyone who might listen. You light candles. You whisper in Latin you don't understand. You cross yourself so often your arm aches. You try to live clean, to avoid sin, because you've seen what happens to sinners. Or at least you've seen what people say happens. You've seen death. You've watched it come into the house slow and quiet, sit in the corner and wait. You've felt the cold that isn't from outside. You've heard the final breath, the rattle, the silence. And still somehow you go on. You keep working. You keep eating. You laugh when you can. You hold your loved ones close, not because you can save them, but because you know you can't. And that's the cruel magic of the medieval world. You fear death more than anything, and yet it's your oldest companion, always watching, always waiting, always just one cough away. You might think that life in the Middle Ages was hard for everyone, and you'd be right. But if you're a woman, it's a whole other level of difficult hidden beneath layers of duty, silence, and the exhausting performance of obedience. If you're born female, your life's already been decided before your first breath. Your role, daughter, then wife, then mother, unless you die in childbirth. Then you're a name someone mentions once a year softly while lighting a candle. Your childhood is short. Sweetness, curiosity, and giggles, if they happen, are brief and rationed. By the time you're 10, you're working. In the fields, the kitchen, the loom. You're hauling water, chasing goats, washing linens by hand, until your fingers crack and bleed. No one waits for you to grow up. They just expect it early. If your family is poor, your chores are endless. If your family is slightly better off, you get more clothes, not fewer expectations. If you're noble, well, then you're educated, but not in philosophy or science, in how to manage a household, how to embroider, how to marry strategically, how to not embarrass your father. Marriage not romantic, a transaction. If you're lucky, your husband is only twice your age. If you're unlucky, he sees you as property and everyone agrees with him. You don't choose him. You're given. Traded like land or cattle. There's a ceremony, a feast, and then you're his. Legally, physically, spiritually. Your body belongs to him. Your children too. And children, you'll have them. Many if you survive. The average medieval woman spends most of her adult life either pregnant nursing or recovering from one or the other. There's no contraception beyond whispered herbs and prayers. Miscarriages are common. So are stillbirths. The midwife is your guardian angel and your last hope every single time. Labor hurts, of course, more than words can say. But no one talks about that. You're expected to be strong, quiet, and grateful. If the baby lives, you nurse it yourself, unless you're rich enough to hire someone poorer to do it for you. If the baby dies, you're told it's God's will. You nod, you bury, you move on, because you have to, and your day never ends. You cook, clean, weave, mend, feed chickens, feed children, soothe the sick, watch the fire, stir the pottage. You don't get to sit down until the youngest child's asleep and the house is quiet. And even then, you're probably spinning wool in the dim light of a tallow candle, your knuckles aching, and your thoughts drifting toward what needs doing tomorrow. And yet somehow you keep going. You build families, hold them together. You teach your children to walk, to speak, to survive. You teach them to fear God, respect elders, and not wander into the woods alone. You wipe their noses, kiss their foreheads, swat their hands away from the fire. You love them fiercely, even knowing how easily they can vanish. Because children die, often, of fever, of cough, of water that looked clean, of food that wasn't, of a fall, a scratch, a curse. 1 in 3 doesn't live past 5. Half won't make it to adulthood. You prepare yourself. You pretend you're prepared. You aren't. But family life isn't only sorrow. It has its comforts. A child's laughter. A quiet night by the fire. A husband who remembers your name and doesn't raise his hand. A neighbor who shares a story or a bit of cheese. A feast day when everyone smiles and your baby dances on unsteady feet to a rhythm older than memory. Extended families live close under the same roof if needed. Grandparents help raise babies. Older siblings raise the younger ones. Cousins are everywhere. Privacy doesn't exist, but neither does true loneliness. Not really. There's warmth in this chaos. Familiar faces, shared burdens, a kind of unspoken love that grows from labor and proximity. You might not say, "I love you." That's not the custom. But you know who'll help when the roof leaks, who'll share herbs when the cough starts, who'll carry your baby if you collapse in the field. And women do have bonds with each other, midwives, neighbors, sisters. They gather by wells over spinning wheels during feast preparations. They share advice to gossip prayers, and sometimes quiet rebellion. A knowing glance, a rolled eye, a whispered tale about a priest who drinks too much, or a husband who can't find his shoes without help. This is your circle, your strength. And yes, there are outliers. Noble women with books and gardens. Nuns with ink-stained fingers and soft sandals on stone floors. Wise women with knowledge of herbs and healing, and which mushrooms make you forget your name. They exist on the edges, sometimes respected, sometimes feared, sometimes both. But most women live here in the thick of it, scrubbing, bearing, enduring, loving despite the cost. So you tuck your child into the straw bed. You hum a lullaby you don't remember learning. You kiss the top of their head and pull the blanket tight. You hope they survive the winter. You hope you survive the winter. And as the fire burns low, you sit beside it, eyes heavy wool in your lap, and think not of escape because that's not an option, not of freedom, but of tomorrow's chores, of next week's feast day, of the warmth of your child's hand in yours. And maybe for a moment that's enough. Afternoon in the medieval world isn't a time of rest. It's not when you lean back with a cup of tea, admire the light through the window, and consider which emails you can ignore until tomorrow. It's when the sun is high, your stomach is unsettled from old bread and weak ale, and your body starts whispering unpleasant things about blisters, heat, cold, or exhaustion, depending on the season. There is no post-lunch lull. There is only more work, and worse, more people. Because the real challenge in medieval life isn't always nature, it's each other. Social conflict is a constant simmer barely kept below boiling. In your village, your tiny patch of the world where everyone knows everyone else's business down to their goats' names, tension builds over time. Over land inheritance, rumors, boundaries, bad debts, bad tempers, or simply bad weather, making everyone extra irritable. Your neighbor might accuse you of letting your cow graze on his strip of common pasture. You say the cow wandered. He says it's theft. Words are exchanged, then shouts, then fists, maybe even blood. There's no police force, no phone call for help. Just a crowd forming, someone yelling, "Not again," and maybe if you're lucky, the village reeve stepping in to break it up before someone grabs a pitchfork. Justice is local, harsh, and mostly improvised. There is a lord, yes, but he's far away and uninterested unless the taxes are late or someone accidentally burned his woods. Minor disputes are handled by the manorial court. A group of local men selected by land and status, who meet a few times a year and decide who owes what to whom. Caught stealing bread. Fined. Let your pigs trample someone's field. Fined. Insulted someone's wife in church. Fined and publicly shamed. Refused to attend Mass. That's trickier. Now it's the church's domain. And the church doesn't mess around. Heresy is dangerous. Questioning doctrine the priest, or even complaining too loudly about a bad harvest, can land you in spiritual hot water. Gossip too freely about saints, or suggest that maybe the relic in the chapel is just a knuckle from someone's granddad, and suddenly people are looking at you differently. The fear of excommunication is real. It's not just spiritual, though, that alone is terrifying. It's social. It means being cut off, no sacraments, no community, no burial in consecrated ground. You're outside everything. That fear is enough to keep people quiet. Mostly. Then there's crime. Theft is common because hunger is constant. But justice isn't balanced. Steal a loaf and you're paraded through town with a shaved head or your ear nailed to the pillory. But if you're a landholder, you can take from a peasant with little consequence. Status is protection. There are outlaws, too. Men who vanish into the woods after robbing the wrong cart or killing the wrong man. You hear stories of bandits hiding near the crossroads, waiting for a lone traveler. Sometimes the bandit is someone you knew, a cousin, a former plowman, a boy who got tired of starving. And always underneath all of it is fear. Of strangers, of outsiders, of people who don't follow the rules. A stranger in your village means trouble. Maybe a peddler, maybe a spy, maybe someone carrying disease. You don't ask questions, you just watch closely. Sometimes the conflicts are bigger. Feuds between families that go back generations, an insult at a wedding, a broken betrothal, a drunken brawl that turned fatal. Vengeance is a quiet hobby here, passed down like bad furniture. Women face their own layer of conflict: jealousy, reputation, accusation. Say the wrong thing, wear the wrong thing, or attract the wrong attention, and the whispers start. She goes into the woods too often. She has herbs no one else grows. She spoke Latin once. Witchcraft. In this time is not about bubbling cauldrons or flying broomsticks. It's about fear, control, and otherness. The line between wise woman and witch is dangerously thin, and it shifts with the mood of the village. If the cows are sick and the rain won't fall, someone must be to blame. And it's probably a woman who knows how to make tea that helps headaches. Punishment is brutal. Stocks, whipping, branding, hanging. Or worse, the silent kind of punishment being shunned, avoided, denied help. Left alone until desperation becomes death. Children aren't spared either. They learn early how the world works. If they fight, they're punished. If they steal, they're shamed. If they speak out of turn, they're slapped. They grow up fast. They watch their elders and learn the rules: when to speak, when to kneel, when to keep your eyes on the ground. And for all of this struggle, this hierarchy, there's still a strange kind of unity. You all live here. You all suffer the same weather, the same taxes, the same aching knees. So when the worst comes, a fire, a storm, a sickness, people do help. They bring water, they lend hands, they rebuild. Because in the end, you're all stuck together. And sometimes under all that conflict, there's love. A shared loaf of bread, a song sung across fences, two children chasing a chicken, laughing like the world isn't falling apart. A man who, after a long day's labor, carves a toy from wood and quietly places it in his daughter's hands. It's not peace, but it's a kind of balance, one that holds barely until someone lets their pigs into someone else's barley again. Then it starts over. The sun begins to sink behind the trees, throwing long shadows across the muddy track that runs through your village. The air cools quickly. Not the pleasant kind of cool, refreshing, gentle, but the sort that sneaks down your collar and curls around your spine like a warning. Night is coming. And in the medieval world, night is not rest. It is danger. It is mystery. It is fear. There are no street lamps, no headlights, no porch lights waiting to be clicked on. When darkness falls, it falls completely. Unless you're lucky enough to afford candles or you're willing to risk burning more wood than your family can spare, you live by firelight, moonlight, and instinct. Inside your home, the hearth is the only source of light. The flames flicker low, the wood damp and stubborn. The room fills with smoke, casting shadows that shift like spirits. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind becomes something else, someone else. You huddle closer to the fire, not just for warmth, but for comfort. There is safety in flame, in noise, in human breath, and the quiet murmur of someone telling a story to distract the children from the darkness pressing against the walls. Outside, the world transforms. The road is silent. The fields are still. But the danger doesn't sleep. Wolves roam the forest. You've heard them. Their howls echo off the hills, sharp and distant. Sometimes they get closer. Livestock go missing. Tracks appear in the mud, eyes gleam in the shadows. There are bandits, too. Men who hide during the day and strike at night. Desperate, hungry, cruel. They know the value of a warm cloak, a fat chicken, a child left too far from the door. And then there are fires. A single spark can turn an entire village to ash. Thatch burns fast. Wood burns faster. Chimneys are rare and every house is a tinderbox. You sleep with a bucket near the door. If someone shouts fire, you run. You don't stop to save your cloak or your boots. Just your family. If you're lucky, crime doesn't sleep either. Drunks stumble out of taverns. Fights begin over spilled beer or old insults. If someone's going to be stabbed, it happens now, in the dark, while no one's watching. You might hear it. A scuffle, a scream, then silence. You don't investigate. You stay inside. You pray it's none of your kin. And always, always there is the fear of what you can't see. The spirits, the dead, the things that walk without names. You've heard the tales. Everyone has. The woman in white who walks the stream banks looking for her drowned child. The restless soul of the blacksmith who cheated the church and now roams with glowing eyes and rattling chains. The devil himself appearing as a dog or a man with hooves offering gold that turns to ash by morning. Children whisper these stories under blankets. Adults pretend not to believe, but still they leave offerings. Salt at the doorway, iron above the hearth, a crucifix at every window, just in case. And when someone dies, you cover the mirrors. You close the windows. You light a candle and pray the soul doesn't linger. Death is not just an ending. It's a presence. You can feel it in the room, heavy, cold, watching. You've felt it before. It's why you sleep lightly, why you jump at every sound, why you don't walk the road alone even in daylight. And yet somehow this is when you sleep. You stretch out on your straw mattress blanket pulled up to your chin, the fire flickering low. Your body aches. Your mind buzzes with the day's worries. But there is no room for rest until you've prayed. You murmur the Lord's Prayer. The Hail Mary, a string of desperate requests whispered into the dark. Protect my children. Keep the fire lit. Let the roof hold. Let no one come through the door. You lie still, listening. Someone snores. A mouse scratches behind the wall. A log shifts in the fire. Then silence. A thick, ancient silence that fills the room and presses down on your chest. Sleep doesn't come easy. It never does. But eventually, exhaustion wins. You drift. And even then, in sleep, the fear doesn't leave. You dream of shadows, of wolves, of illness, of standing before a judge you can't see listing sins you forgot to confess. Because in the medieval world, the fear of death is not reserved for the old. It belongs to everyone. Children die. Mothers die. Strong men fall from ladders or are struck down by fevers. No one is immune. No one is safe. You don't know how long you'll live. You just hope it's long enough to finish the harvest, to see your child walk, to watch spring return. And in the silence of night, with death curled like a cat beneath your bed, you hold on to the smallest, quietest hope that you'll wake up, that tomorrow will come, that today wasn't your last. And in the dark you sleep, not peacefully, but deeply, desperately. because you have to, because morning waits, and you'll need your strength. And now, as the night settles completely, and the fire burns itself into soft orange memory, you lie still on your straw mattress, finally still wrapped in a rough blanket that smells faintly of smoke, sweat, and something older. Your limbs are sore. Your eyes are heavy. Your mind is drifting between the echoes of the day and the quiet terror of what tomorrow might bring. But for the first time today, the world has gone quiet. The chickens aren't clucking. The neighbor isn't shouting. The children aren't crying. It's just you and the dark. And maybe for a moment you think about what you've lived through just in this one medieval day. You woke up cold, stiff, and hungry. You cleaned yourself with water that numbed your fingers. You ate a meal that barely filled your stomach. You labored until your body felt like stone digging, carrying, scrubbing, bending. You prayed out of habit and fear. You tried to stay invisible. You tried to survive. You wore the same clothes as yesterday. You walked past the same smoke-blackened walls. You listened to the same stories repeated by the same voices under the same thatched roof. And you did it all without medicine, electricity, privacy, or rest. You did it without knowing if you'd see the next sunrise, without knowing if your child's cough would go away or get worse, without knowing if your neighbor would report you to the reeve, or if your roof would hold, or if the plague would reach your village by next week. You lived on instinct, on hope, on habits formed by generations before you who knew only this life is hard. Death is close, and if you're lucky, you get a little laughter in between. And yet even in all that darkness there was light. A moment by the fire, a bite of bread, a song that made you smile if only for a verse, the weight of your child's head on your lap, the soft breath of a sleeping sibling beside you, the way the sun filtered through the window just for a second, like a silent promise that not everything was cruel. The Middle Ages weren't just dirty, they were heavy, they were uncertain, they were human. And medieval people, they weren't caricatures in a dusty book. They were us, just without the buttons, the screens, the second chances. They loved, they feared, they held hands under the stars and prayed for a better tomorrow. You were one of them just for tonight. You felt what they felt, the constant ache of labor, the fragile comfort of firelight, the quiet courage it takes to keep going. And now, as your breathing slows and your thoughts fade, you return not to the flickering candles and cold stone walls, but to the world you left behind. To your own bed, your own warmth, your own modern comforts. No lice, no frost, no chamber pot, no chamber, just soft sheets, clean air, the quiet hum of a fan, a glass of water you don't have to fear, a floor that isn't made of mud. You are here, now, and you are lucky. So tonight, as you drift off, remember you don't have to wake up in the Middle Ages. Sleep well.